Welcome, Space Cadets, to this episode where we're going to be looking at beam weaponry. We're just bringing in a frigate in through here, which is decked out with Thuon beams and basically Maxos blasters as well, which I'll talk about the difference between those. One is a beam weapon, one is a pulse beam, essentially. They're both technically beam weapons. It's getting closer and closer to actually now going to be starting its actual attack run. We'll just see the difference between the two weapons to get started, then we'll have a look at the damage that it actually does, that it does cause. So I've given an attack order against this mining station of the Boscara. In fact, what I might do is I might just pause it here. And how far off are we? We're inside the range now of the Boscara, and it's very hard to see it, but there's a line through there. So we're now inside its range, and we should be getting close-ish. Still a little way to go. Okay, let's just go and watch what actually happens here. But we'll select this one and watch what actually goes on through the shielding, the armor, and then the hull of the actual of the mining station. As just while this attack does go in, I've got it down very, very small. Now what I've got is I've got Thuon beams at the front, and I've then got the Maxos blasters on the side. So we'll sort of watch what actually does go on through here. So it's getting closer and closer. Let's get it down so we can see everything. So the different types. One is a pulse, one is a beam, which you'll sort of be able to tell when you sort of watch it go in. There we go. That's the Thuon beam. And then it's a little bit shorter distance before we get the pulse laser coming back in. Now see what actually happened there. We did good damage against the shield. We sort of took the shield down a little bit with what was going on. The ship is still coming in closer. The pulse lasers haven't gone off yet. The Maxos blaster. There goes the Maxos blaster firing its way in. Now there's a torpedo coming back. We just did more damage with both of those hitting the actual station again as well. In a second we'll get another fire from the Thuon beam, and now we've just taken a bit of hit, and now we go back in again. Just keep on watching. There's one that missed. Now that beam that we're seeing through there is a Sentinel beam as well. So we've got another beam on the ship. This is essentially a way of doing point defense, but it faces, in this particular design, it faces the rear. So it's actually sort of firing at the ships in behind. We're now getting a little bit of bypass in through there. Now there's a chance with the shielding that some of the damage will bleed through into the actual shield itself. And so, through the shield and onto the armor, which is what we're seeing back in through this side. So we've now done a little bit of damage on the armor. Let's just keep it coming back in and have another look. But generally, that's going to be rare that we see that. Now we missed with one, but we hit with the other. Hit with the Thuon beam again, and we're now still just damaging the shielding each time. Let's just speed it up a little bit, because I'm mainly interested now in what's happening here, more so than watching what goes on. Our ship will then park itself where it can sort of then do good damage. And now they missed, I guess, again. They then hit us again with one of the others. See, the shielding has now dropped completely, and now we're smashing through the armor. So there wasn't much armor there. Now we're into the hull, and when we hit the hull, we're going to start doing damage to componentry. So we're seeing damage in the damage column and in the destroyed column. We're now starting to see more and more elements of the actual base itself being destroyed. They've still got some firing power coming back, but overall we just went from the outside in, like sort of peeling away the layers of an onion. That's what beam weapons do. They do equal damage, but from the outside in. That's essentially sort of like a bit of an illustration. I'll just let it sort of go through and actually blow up the station, because that will look fairly cool, I would think, in this sort of instance. Just let it continue on. There's not that much to do. I might just speed it up. So we'll let it do its job. How much damage did we take? Not much at all, as you can sort of see through there. So this thing is getting less and less. There's hardly anything left that's actually operational anymore. All the weaponry has been taken down. The station is ready to be blown up. But that's what beam weapons do. They're very, very basic. They just work from the outside in and just do their job. So that's essentially what a beam weapon does. All right, let's go in now and have a look in detail at what the beam weapons consist of. Okay, so beam weapons occupy the top of the weapons area in the research tree. And so you've got like your pulse weapons at the very, very top and your beam weapons down through here. They're both beam weapons, but you saw the difference there. The long beam was the Thuon beam, which was a constant beam weapon. So that was the Thuon beam that we were using there, the medium Thuon beam. And what we had, the other two small weapons that we actually had were the Maxos blasters, which were pulsed blast weapons. And that was the two little yellow dots that then fired off every so often. Let's have a look at these in more detail. The other one that we actually had on board was the Sentinel multi-beam defense, which is a really, really good weapon in terms of point defense. And it was trying to get into the action there a little bit, but really it was facing the wrong way to have any real bearing on the fight. Let's have a look at this in detail in the actual ship editor. Again, I'm not going to be showing how to, I'm not really worrying about designing a ship. I just want to compare the different types of beam weapons. And then when we do the other weapons, I'll come back and sort of compare them with the beam weapons, just so you get a bit of a feel for where they sit. This is sort of like, I guess, the baseline that we're doing right now. Sort of like what we did with the humans, I guess, when we were sort of going through the through each of the actual factions. This is essentially using the beam weapons as a starting point for then checking out the others when we have to come back in and look at everything. So let's go into the editor. Now, at this time in the tech, we're only in tech level 1. Tech level 0 is the first level of tech. Tech level 1 is the first one across. We've got the Maxos small blaster, like the small one in through here. We don't have the medium at this point in time, so let's compare it with this small Thuon beam. So we'll select the Thuon beam, which is our constant beam, and just hover over the Maxos blaster, which is what we had on our weapon. Now, actually, maybe we'll go and have a quick look at the small Thuon beam with the medium beam that we did actually have on the ship itself. And you'll see that most of the differences there are doubled. So for example, the damage for the medium is 24 as opposed to 12. It's 20.04 at max range as opposed to 10. Everything else is, the range is the same. Most of the things are going to be the actual same. The difference with this one as opposed to most other weapons, where we've got in fact, I'll just show you back in through here. These are the weapon mounts or the hard points. So a hard point is where you then put turrets on top. Most other weapons, when they go from small to medium, essentially end up with two of the same weapon from the one turret or from the one hard point. And so, but not with the Thuon beams. They actually are a little bit different, but not much. The result is as if it was two, sort of. So if we have a bit of a look again at the Thuon beam as opposed to the medium Thuon beam back in through that side, one thing you'll notice is that the speed is the same, the energy per shot is actually the same, but the firing rate is 50% more, like it takes a little bit longer for the Thuon beam to sort of then operate. So it's just a little bit longer for that one to sort of fire. So the medium is actually slower than the small. And what else have we got down through there? And also for the intercept fire rate, that also then goes down, which I'll talk about in just a minute anyway. But I just wanted to sort of show that this is not, it's not two of the small weapons on the one mount. It is its own. It's a bit of a larger weapon. The end result is it basically does double the damage. So it still sort of works out the same as if it was two mounts, but it isn't. It technically isn't. Anyway, that's just beside the point. Let's have a look at it against the Maxos blaster, back in through this side. So the top one there was we've got weapon countermeasures. Now, technically, and I haven't seen this happen, but technically, a point defense weapon can actually target a beam. And as I say, I've never seen it in the game. Not that you would really notice it, but this is their ability to bypass a point defense weapon targeting their actual beam is the top one up through there. In fact, let's go to the very, very top. Close-in weapons. So these close-in weapons are weapons designed to be fired at close range. So just keep that in mind. There's a few different types of weapons that are designed this way. Railguns are another one, which we'll talk about next, I think. I think we'll do that one because they're very similar in a lot of ways to these beam weapons, but they've got a big difference in the way that damage is applied. So anyway, the close-in weapons are what we have through there. A big change we actually have is the size. The Thuon beam is 14 size. The Maxos blaster is only 10. Now that's tiny in terms of actual bang for buck to put onto an actual ship. So you see a lot of Maxos blasters used on ship designs, particularly if you've just got a little bit of space left over and you've got some extra turrets that you're sort of wanting to deck something out. They're a really good addition to throw on board because they do they do a fair bit of damage for what they actually pack, and so at a very, very small size. Both take 5 crew. Both have got like an energy requirement of 1 energy per second. And that's I'll be talking about this in ship designs. I won't go through this into any great detail, but it's basically just to keep the engines ready. It's to have sort of like a crew ready to man it at all times. It's just it's part of the static energy usage of the ship. So I probably won't really reference that again in any of these other videos going forward into the actual weapon types. They use different materials. One uses krypton, one uses necros stone. That's neither here nor there. So weapon countermeasures are its ability to bypass point defense weapons, which point defense weapons don't have a chance in hell, to be honest, of really hitting these things. But the Maxos blaster does move more slowly, so it's a bit easier for that to be targeted, but it is still quite difficult at plus 62. Weapons targeting. Now this is the plus 10 that we actually have in through there. I'm not exactly sure what this is, but I think it's actually its ability to actually target and hit the various small craft. Like for example, if there's seeking missiles, or if there is salt pods, if there's fighter craft, things like that. I think it just makes it a little bit easier for it to target than the Maxos blaster. So the beam, as it sort of races through, it can sort of hone in a little bit more easily on those ships. I think that's what it means. I'm not 100% sure. By the way, if anyone knows the direct answer for this, please just write an answer. Please put a comment in saying, yep, that's what it is, or no, it's this. It's always very helpful. I've really enjoyed reading the comments of people who say, "Oh, you got that wrong," or you can look at this a different way. I think it adds so much value. So I would also urge people to read the comments if you're watching these videos, just to see if there are other perspectives, because I think it is very, very helpful. Now you can see there the Thuon beam, the small Thuon beam, actually does less damage than the Maxos blaster. So the actual Maxos blaster does better, even though it's a smaller weapon. The actual damage rate is also smaller. The damage at maximum range is much, much bigger for the Maxos blaster, but the actual damage, the maximum damage the damage rate at maximum range is actually lower. So there's actually like a crossover point where the Thuon beam is going to be better at longer range than the Maxos blaster. The Maxos blaster is better at close range, and it's just what does it come down to? Is there another aspect to this? There should be an accuracy aspect to it. In fact, we're not seeing it on here. I might just go back and show you that in the actual stats as to in the research areas, so we can sort of see what does go on there. Now the next thing along, we've got the bombardment structure. By the way, the small Thuon beam is actually is like a tech level back from where we actually are, so that's why it's not as good. If we use the medium Thuon beam for some of these things, we'll see a bit of a difference there. So if we have a look, for example, for the small Thuon beam, we don't have any bombardment abilities, but we do have very, very small amounts that can be used with the Maxos blaster. But if we go to the medium Thuon beam, we then do have the same deal. So if I go to medium and then compare that with the small Maxos blaster, we do actually have bombardment abilities. It's just not very good, that's all. So neither of these are very good at bombardment, which is fine because that's not really what you're using them for. Let's just go back to where we were with the small versus the small. We can see there the range of 1100, whereas the Maxos blaster has a shorter range at 990, and so it's actually the Thuon beam does have a range advantage. That's why we saw the red beam fire first before the pulse lasers went in. So it just gave us a little bit of extra range, and sometimes that can be important. Most often not. Then we've got the damage fall-off ratio, 15% of damage per 1,000. So essentially at maximum range, we are losing 15%. That's why we're sort of seeing from 12 to 10, for example, if we have a bit of a look at this one through there. Actually, there's a point-blank accuracy. I can show it there. Yeah, because it doesn't show it actually in this one through this side. So this is also where the damage rate comes back in. The point blank accuracy for Thuon beam is 88% of the shots are going to sort of hit. Plus, there's other things that then sort of also, like there's targeting and countermeasures and all sorts of things you've got to sort of add and subtract to get an actual final number as to what the likelihood is of getting a hit. But at maximum range, it's only 66% of the time it's going to actually do the hitting. If we go to the Maxos Blaster, it'll be exactly the same. Actually, no, it's a bit smaller. Their point blank accuracy is 80%, and the maximum range accuracy is only 40%. Actually, I thought they were the same. So these are actually quite different. This is why the damage rate at long range is less for the Maxos Blaster, but it's sort of more for at short range because of that extra damage that it does do. Let's just go back to the Thuon beams again. So Thuon beam on the left, Maxos Blaster on the right. So that's why that crossover with the damage rate at maximum range about a third of the way down, we've got 1.32 per second as opposed to 1.21. It's because of that accuracy. The Maxos Blaster is not as accurate, but that can be then changed through targeting. Can be changed also from the enemy ship through countermeasures as well. So there's a whole lot of other aspects that do play into that. But so you can actually enhance it or sort of or mitigate it if you are fighting against these sorts of things. Okay, so as we go down further, we've then got the speed of the actual shots. You saw there that the beam at 5,000 per second was basically straight. It was just straight there, whereas we did actually see the pulses, the pulse laser essentially sort of being fired, and it goes at 1100 per second. So it's not quite as fast. The energy usage per shot. This is different than what we saw up the top there with the energy at 1 per second. That's the static energy use just to keep it operational. But then to actually fire it, it requires 14 and then 10 for the Maxos Blaster. The firing rate is actually quicker for the Maxos Blaster at 4.5 seconds per shot and 5 seconds for the Thuon beam. And then we actually have a few different other areas where we're talking about the intercepting fighter craft and also intercepting seeking craft. Now, the fighters are the bombers and the interceptors, so they're the sorts of things. And I don't know about the assault pods may also be considered that as well, but I'm not 100% sure which one. Not that it matters with these, because these have got the same stats, whether it's going after fighters and bombers or whether it's going after seeking missiles. So missiles and torpedoes essentially will be what is sort of then targeted with those. The intercept range is higher for the Thuon beam at 550 as opposed to 495 for the Maxos Blaster, and the energy again is the same as firing a normal shot because you are still firing the same gun, but the intercept fire rate is actually extended from both of these when you do use it as a point defense weapon. So you can use it as a point defense weapon. It's not very effective. In fact, let's have a look and see what the Thuon beam does against the Sentinel multi-beam. So the Sentinel multi-beam is a dedicated point defense weapon. And when we have a look at it, we can see there that instead of doing 12 damage, it does 3 damage. So it's very, very minimal when used against capital ships or big ships. So the damage rate is very, very small. It does have a much higher rate of fire, so technically it can actually get more damage in. What the damage rate per second doesn't allow for is the reduction of the damage that comes in per shot. Now, 3 damage per shot for most ships is very, very easy to completely nullify. So it actually does 0 damage. At 12, even when it's nullifying damage, it will still let a little bit in. Now, a small ship with only 1 piece of armor will probably only be able to block 1 of the 3. So there'll be still 2 that will break through. But for bigger ships where they may have sort of like 3 armor, the 3 armor will take off 1 point for each point of armor, and so that's then going to leave you with nothing. I'll explain that when we do the ship design aspect, or maybe I'll do that when she'll be talking about shields and how they work, and shields and armor in one of these videos. So I'll go through how that bit of it works, but you don't use the point defense weapons as your main weapons because they just do not have enough hitting power, even though the damage per second seems pretty high. It doesn't actually work out that way. You've got to really look at the amount of damage each shot does, which is in this case 12 versus 3. The damage rate is not really going to be all that important because of other factors. So at maximum range at 2.46, again, we don't have to really worry about that one. The Sentinel beam is almost the same range as these Thuon beams. So it's actually not too bad. The damage fall off is 19% per 1,000, and then it's the same. It's almost immediate again when those beams do fire. That was the long yellow beams that we saw. What else have we got? We've got only a fraction of the energy used to actually do it. The firing rate is every 8 seconds if it's firing against an enemy craft. And then for the interception, we can then sort of see that the intercept fighter is 12, and also for seeking, so that's the damage, which is a lot more than what we see for the Thuon beam. Now you'll see there that it's got 24 damage per second is what it can dish out for both fighters and for seeking. And so what these then mean is that you can actually deal a lot of damage to small craft. These are designed for this way. Now, why is that happening like this? It's because we've got 4 shots per volley back in what actually happens, and the volley firing rate is 0.1 seconds. So it fires, the 4 shots fire very, very quickly together. The intercept of intercept fire volley rate is 2 seconds as opposed to 6.25 seconds. So for when it is doing an interception, it's much, much faster to shoot. So it can fire a lot to try to then sort of stop anything that is coming in against it. Now, you can see there at the very, very top of this, we've got the weapons countermeasures at plus 72 as opposed to the weapon targeting. So that's identical. So we can actually bypass any point defense, which is fine. But the weapon targeting, it does actually have a better ability to actually hit the small craft as well. So we get another plus 20% on top of everything else as well to actually do the interception. And almost wish it was intercept targeting would sort of, and intercept countermeasures would be probably better than weapon as an actual description through there. But that basically sort of shows you the 3 different types of beam weapons. The Sentinel multi-beam is an incredibly good weapon. The one thing I haven't really mentioned with this is is with any of these. These are like full-length beam, whether it be full-length beam whether it be the Maxos blasters, which is direct fire. These have to have whatever the angle is that we've got with the field of fire from whatever the hard point is, has to use that angle. So it can't fire back away from the angle. It has to have an angle set up for that one. So when we had the Sentinel beam on the back of the craft, it was only able to fire once things had gone past the ship. I don't know if you remember in the fight, there was a couple of torpedoes that missed us, and that's when it fired. It couldn't fire towards the front of the craft at all, which is sort of not where you really want it. So you do sort of want to have the Sentinel beams to be able to cover the rear of the ship, because quite often other ships will end up coming in behind you to sort of dogfight you. That happens a lot in the game. So having a Sentinel beam at the back is useful, because it does allow any fighters that are getting behind you to still be targeted. But also you do pretty much need them from the front as well, because you're going to have you're going to end up having a lot of missiles coming towards you, or torpedoes that you need to sort of chop down as well. So you do need both in essence. So this design would have been better with either 2 Sentinels, on one of these and the back, or like maybe even a missile at the back there, because a seeking weapon, which we'll be doing soon, will then sort of fire and then move to the front. But I'll talk about that when we talk about seeking weapons. Anyway, I'm going to leave this episode here, guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next episode.